Today on a special crossover episode, two teams in the NL West that maybe, just maybe, people aren't talking about enough.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast and the Locked On Padres podcast, because Javier Reyes is here and we got a special crossover episode coming your way today. We're talking about the NL West. I don't know. How do you want to refer to these two teams? I mean, everyone's talking Dodgers. The Giants just, of course, added people. What are we talking about here with the Padres and the Rockies? What's our little click name?
Is it fair to say the memes of the NL West? I feel like there were both in very different ways, kind of like the memes of the division, where the Rockies are, I mean, I don't even want to get into that. There's a whole bunch with them. They haven't been good in a long time. The Dick Montfort stuff and trading Arenado for a pack of veggie straws, all that stuff. And then the Padres are the team that makes all the big moves and seemingly gets nothing out of it. I think that's what the kind of, perspective that people have on both of our teams is. And I think that they're kind of memes in their own way, man. But hopefully, as we're going to talk about today, for not much longer. Much longer.
I agree. And, we can take solace in this, except for one shortened year, same amount of championships as the big spending Dodgers. So let us just throw at least our one punch there at the Dodgers. But we're going to dive into some doomsday scenarios for these teams, but also look at the hopeful side, the positive side of teams that I think got criticized this offseason. I don't know how much on the Padres side, but the Rockies considered to be by some the worst offseason in baseball. And these teams I still think can surprise folks as long as we mentioned in our pre-show talk there, you have the right context. So we're going to dive into all that and more today. Before we dive into everything today, got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download Gametime at the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Gametime. All right. Javi, let's just first start here, a little generic, because spring training's been going on. Before we go to doomsday and go crazy, how are you feeling about watching the Padres so far this spring? Are you feeling a more sense of confidence? Are you feeling a sense of dread? Or is it kind of too early to tell and stuff is still way early spring training? You're not buying too much into things.
Look, man, I'm seeing people freak out over the dumbest stuff. It's like people never. Now, partially, I want to preface it by saying I understand some people are just posting and just saying things to say things because we all like talking. We're really excited. But there are some people who are like, are we really going to freak out because this player gave up 2 earned runs or whatever? And like, it just year after year shows it doesn't matter. And it also shows that the players who do well in spring training does not matter. The only thing that matters for is those bench rest of the roster guys. Like, are they going to make the team? And then for just hoping that your team doesn't get hit by the injury bug, right? We've seen that happen with Tampa a little bit already. We've seen that happen with, who was it the other day?
Sonny Gray? Are you thinking
Sonny Gray is one of them? Justin Verlander's another one. So yeah, you just don't want to get hit by the injury bug. But other than that, it's like, you just want to, it's just a preface. You know what I mean? Like I said before, like you're just trying to get ready. And in the case of the Padres, everyone's excited about Jackson Merrill. It seems like he's going to make the team. I've heard, and people have read elsewhere, that it sounds like he's going to make the team. And he's got he has a little bit of that it factor. He's got the juice. So that's been cool to see. And in general, it's just kind of cool to see baseball again. But other than that, like, I don't care if but guys, Garrett Cole gave up 4 home runs and 6 runs in a spring training start, his first season, about to be his first season with the Yankees. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? A lot of times I think people are trying stuff and they're just experimenting, especially on the pitching side. And it's just really hard to gauge into what actually matters. And I love when everyone starts saying, well, I really like the way that his bat speed, I think he looks really good. I'm like, but it's baseball. Like, it's too small of a sample size, even if it's players you haven't seen before. Like, you're not at the practice every day. At least with some other sports, you have a little bit more, you can see a little bit more with. But baseball, it's like, it could have just been a bat at bat. You know what I mean? Like, right. I didn't learn anything about Jackson Merrill that last time. So that's a long-winded way of me saying I'm happy that we're almost there, but we should probably chill out with the overreactions.
Yeah, and being Rockies fans over here, we're sitting here and can't help but overreact because the spring's been good for the Rockies. The Rockies have been hitting the ball out of the yard. They have some spring training stat leaders. I mean, again, all that stuff is a spring training thing. But when you're in kind of the position of the Rockies, you want to see Montero be tied for the lead in home runs in spring training and OPS, because that's a good sign for him earning his spot on the field and putting more pressure on Chris Bryant to perform. So as for Rockies fans, we can't overreact too much to spring training, where the Rockies might be playing their best baseball of the year when we look back on it. But you can't sit there and completely ignore that Kyle Freeland's fastball velocity is up by roughly 4 miles per hour. You have young guys performing and doing well. Brenton Doyle is showing some offense, and the Rockies are aggressively stealing bases right now in spring training to hopefully set up for a season where they're going to be more aggressive. The most exciting thing for Rockies fans in the spring right now is that, I said it before, it's a new look team. This is a new identity for the Rockies, and it definitely brings a level of excitement there. But let's go from hopeful optimism and curious about spring training stuff to what would derail the season for the Padres and the Rockies. And I think a prime example is you're looking at why the Rockies were so bad last year. It started with the spring training injury to Brendan Rodgers, which knocked Brendan Rodgers out of most of the season, and the Rockies needing to scramble for second base, moving Ryan McMahon, as well as their pitching staff getting injured throughout the year. Those are still very much nightmare situations. If the Rockies pitching staff does not stay healthy, they will really suffer. And if the Rockies lose one of their star veterans outside of maybe Chris Bryant, because we haven't really seen the full Chris Bryant impact, it will significantly harm this team. So for the Padres, what would derail the season?
What would derail the season is so it's two things. Number one, it's not necessarily that it would derail their season, but it would be one of the worst developments to happen. And the first thing I want to talk about is Xander Bogaerts. I'm super bullish on him. I think he's going to be good. I think people have been way too on him. I've been bringing up Trey Turner a lot lately because he rejected a contract offer from the Padres, and also because I've found it weird. And I get that there's some differences, that Bogaerts has more of a ground ball rate, Trey Turner's a little bit more line drive, et cetera, et cetera. But my thing is like, well, Trey Turner's an awful defender, and he was just as similarly weak in the first half, if not worse, than Xander Bogaerts, and they also both were great in the second half. Yet no one's talking about that. They're all like, wow, they blew it. And it's like, oh, well, Javi, it's because of the contract. They gave Trey Turner an 11-year contract too. So or at least a super long one. I think it was 11 years. So to me, it's been puzzling. I'm like, Bogaerts, even with everything last year and refusing to drive in runners, which was basically the only reason he had a bad season. He was just uncharacteristically bad, batted below 200 with runners in scoring position, 200 BABIP, 300 career with the Red Sox, right? So that was bad. But that's a little bit fluky. While with Trey Turner, it's like, I don't understand why we're just all in on him. Like, or how should I phrase this? That we're forgiving all of Trey Turner's bad season, while Bogaerts, who also dealt with a wrist injury that he got hit by a Spencer Strider fastball with, and also changing from the American League to the National League, I think has an impact too. I think people are discounting that. But all that aside, if Xander Bogaerts were to be bad this year, that would be very concerning because, again, it's a 10-year contract. I think Trey Turner still has the juice. I think he's going to be great. But if you're in that situation, it's like, that's a long contract. And now all of a sudden you're looking at the Padres with questions about how they're going to spend about their future. That would be one of the worst developments for the future. He could still be a good player. I do think it'll be concerning, though, if he's just fine. You know what I mean? Like, he's a decent player, a guy who, can hit around 280, walk a decent amount, hit maybe 20 home runs, but that's not really what you paid for. You paid for a little bit more, especially in the early going, right? Yeah. You don't want to see, this is something you like to see in year 4 or year 5. You're like, great, I'll take it. You know what I mean? And then I'd say the doomsday scenario is, I think, 2 things. So that's just one thing for the future. I think for this season, it's 2 things. One, and this is the same thing for every team, so it's not unique, injury to one of their 3 top starters. And they have 3 starters, Musgrove, King, and Darvish, 2 of which, not Musgrove, are a little bit known for some health issues. They haven't always been reliable with that. So if one of them were to go down, it gets a little bit dicey. Are they going to rush their prospects? You know what I mean? Which is something the Padres always do. So you hope they don't do that, but they could. And then the other thing would be, there's a real chance that they get like nothing out of their outfielders outside Tatis. And that's one of the problems. They're currently projected for the lowest amount of WAR for left fielders. Part of that being because of the Jurickson profile projection. And then Jackson Merrill, who we love, and I just talked about ad nauseum. If he's not all that great immediately, which is often the case with 20-year-olds, you know what I mean? Like Tatis is not normal. You do not do what Tatis did his first year. That never happens outside him, Harper, and Adley Rutschman, right? Like it just doesn't happen. So I think those are the two things. Injury to one of those three starters, I think wouldn't kill the team's win total, but it would hurt them. And I think it would make them do some stupid things with calling up their pitchers. And then if they just get nothing out of the outfield, both I think are very possible.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think the Bogarts contract and the Bryant contract are kind of going to follow some similar timelines if Bogarts doesn't perform in this second year. And it's kind of a moment of, hey, we didn't bring you in to just bat whatever and not play 100 games. You're a World Series MVP. You're a World Series champion and an MVP. You were brought in to change the game here a little bit. So I think, some doomsday scenarios. Chris Bryant hurt again. The Rockies blocked their prospects with veterans instead of allowing some of these young guys to play. But I don't think we're going to see that enough because I think the young guys are going to put the pressure on. But again, doomsday scenario, the sophomore trio of the Rockies, the Nolan Jones, Ezekiel Tovar, and Brenton Doyle, instead of steps forward, we see regression. That would mean doom for the Rockies. And reality, and I'll say this too, it's not a doomsday scenario, but something that I think will be really tough for the Rockies is another mediocre Ryan McMahon season. Another season where Ryan McMahon doesn't quite break out as that offensive threat. He can't be just sitting there with that 250 and, a bunch of strikeouts. I don't think anymore. He's got to be more of a bigger threat. And if the Rockies continue to strike out at the rate that they do, that'll also be a problem because they're going to have to win the dogfights. They're going to have to win the 8-7 slugfests. The Rockies not losing a bunch of games is going to be depend on their ability to do that. And they weren't able to do that last year because the pitching staff still has a lot to prove. And of course, health there, like I mentioned. So really, those are the key things to focus on. But I want to talk more about, we focused on doomsday here, Javi, but I think these teams are going to surprise people. I really do. And I want to talk about how they might surprise people and how things might look a little differently than some of the projections people have for the Padres and the Rockies here in 2024. We're going to do that coming up here in segment number 2. But before we do that, got to tell you about some folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro and college league conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the worlds of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos, and more. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find us on Amazon Fire TV, and you can find more great sports coverage on the Locked On Sports Today streaming channel. That's 24/7 sports coverage here from Locked On, available on Amazon Fire TV and on YouTube as well. So go and check out Locked On Sports Today, available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, Javi, we were talking doomsday. We were talking worst case scenarios. We were talking things that could go wrong. But you know what? We've heard enough malarkey about these two teams throughout this offseason. Let's talk about surprises. How can the Padres surprise folks? Because, again, this is a team that's got talent. I mean, Manny Machado is still looming as a potential MVP candidate. Fernando Tatis obviously dealt with a bunch of stuff, but is coming into a full normal season and showed that, hey, I'll play outfield. I don't give a hoot. And again, Xander Bogaerts is good. And like you said, there's 3 solid starters on this Padres team. Is that flashy like the Dodgers and immediately you're confident in the World Series? No, but you can't sit there and say that this is a bad ball club.
No. And I just feel like everyone's, and maybe it's just my circle. It's totally possible. Like I could just be in some sort of, bubble. But for me, it's like, I don't understand why everyone's acting like it's a lock. These are the same people that are always, oh, no one could beat the Dodgers. Oh, no one could do this. Oh, it's easy. I'm hanging out with people who are like, yeah, the Padres are going to be bad. And they've been telling me that, and they've been super bullish on the Blue Jays. You know what I mean? I just feel like there's been, I think there's been a genuine amount of doubt. Now, some of it is very fair. You lose Juan Soto, you lose Blake Snell, you lose Josh Hader. You lose literally 2 players who are the best at their position, arguably, with Soto and Josh Hader. And then you lose a Cy Young quality pitcher. So it's a lot, don't get me wrong. But I just think that this is the one sport where, like, it's not like football and basketball where if you lose your stars, it's over. Now, don't get me wrong. You need them to win the World Series. But when it comes to just, like, having a good season, like, a worse Padres team made the NLCS just 2 years ago. All they had heading into the season and people were confident about was Cronenworth and Manny Machado. That's it. And everything else was just like, yeah, I hope Profar is good. I hope that, what's his face? CJ Abrams could do something. I hope Ha-Seong Kim gets better. I hope Tatis comes back soon. And then they won, 89 games. They have like their best season. They make the NLCS. So my thing is, let's also not act like, oh, well, the war that they're losing. Okay, cool. Why are we acting like, the D-backs are going to get the same amount from Gabriel Moreno next year and Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly? Why are we acting like the Giants? Now, they're a team that people are doubting to. Dodgers, unfortunately, I think it doesn't matter. They can have 3 players underperform, and you're like, yeah, they still probably win 98 at minimum. You know what I mean? So they're an exception, but it's like, why is it a guarantee that Bryson Stott, everybody hates Xander Bogaerts, why is it a guarantee that Bryson Stott, an infielder for the Phillies, is a 3.5 win player again? That's what I don't understand. We're acting like it's fact that all the wins the Padres lost in free agency, I assume Snell's lost. Although I don't even know where the guy's going to sign at this point. Why are we assuming that that's a lock? But then no one else will get better. Machado, Bogaerts, and Tatis all had down years offensively. The entire team had a down year offensively when it came to, driving in runs and extra inning games. They went 2-12, Paul, and extra innings. And everyone's like, that's just going to happen again. That's basically what people are saying. They're basically saying that Machado will be the same. Bogaerts will be the same. And it won't be that he lost his ability. They think that he will hit just as porously with runners in scoring position again, which basically never happens, by the way, for baseball players. Usually. It's actually quite impressive when you're 2 years in a row, you hit below 200 with runners in scoring position. That would be impressive. And that Tatis, who has been an MVP candidate before, a 7 to, dare I say, 9 win player at his, if everything were to work right because of the defense, we're just assuming they're all going to stay the same. All of them will stay the same. No one will be better. Okay. And we're just going to assume that they're going to once again lose, what was it? Out of 32 of their 1-run games, they're going to lose 23 of them. That's basically what people are saying to me when that happens. Now, don't get me wrong. Other teams have improved. The Giants have improved. The D-backs improved. We already know about the Dodgers. There's still some teams out there, but my thing is like, guys, it's not chalk. You got to play the games, man. And my thing is, this is still a team that has shown you it can be electric at times, even if a bit frustrating and not always living up to the payroll. But I don't care. I care about winning. And if they make the playoffs, that's all that matters. As the Dodgers will tell you just 2 years ago, that's all that matters is if you have to face someone in the playoffs.
Yep. And that's, get yourself in the dance, get yourself into the wild card series. That matters, especially when you do look up and say, you know what, whatever, the division, it's probably gone. Yeah. And that's nothing new for the NL West. It doesn't matter. That shouldn't be the focus. Be good enough and then get to a point where you can build the best version of your team at the trade deadline, because the Padres will probably do something at the deadline, and prepare for the playoffs, because I think it would be more surprising to say that the Padres won't be at least in that playoff mix in the second half of the season. Now, the Rockies won't be there, but the Rockies are going to surprise people because everyone thinks that they're the same team from last year. And then it's all right. Let's take the context of last year that no one focuses on. look at all of the injuries to this team. Not a single member of the Colorado Rockies starting rotation that started on opening day finished the year healthy and really finished the season at all. Every single starter either was not on the team or finished the year on the injured list. They didn't have German Marquez. They didn't have Antonio Senzatella, two of their major pitching arms. Now, they're not going to get Senzatella back, unfortunately, for a while because the guy comes back from Tommy John and then comes back from tearing his ACL, and then in his first game back needs Tommy John surgery. So it's going to be probably not going to be seeing him in 2024. But the Rockies, one of the Rockies' best pitchers of all time, is scheduled to come back after the All-Star break in a moment where the Rockies, they're probably not going to be out of it, but could still be raising eyebrows going into the end of 2024 to say, now let's build. Now what do we really need if all these young guys are showing off as much as they can? Because the Rockies have three legit young guys, and I don't think we're going to see too much regression. I mean, if Nolan Jones has the same type of season he had last year, just with more at-bats, that's great because he's going to finish 25-25. He's going to finish with 100 RBI. He's going to finish, as an exciting young guy that's going to cut a bunch of runners down. And you mentioned young players. I mean, Ezequiel Tovar is taking huge strides and is sneakily going to be one of the best shortstops defensively, at least. I'll pump the brakes on the offense first. But there are a bunch of players that have not had their chance to shine for the Rockies, and no one is focused on this. There's just a lot of people, I think, that look at the Rockies and say, they're the same team from last year. No, they're not. The opening day roster last year had Jurickson Profar, CJ Cron, Mike Moustakas, and Randall Grichuk on it. And they weren't sitting on the bench.
CJ Cron in front of me. Don't you dare.
And while CJ Cron can, still hit a couple of 500-foot things, when your best offensive player is CJ Cron going into the season, that's a problem. And Elias Diaz. But Elias Diaz is still going to prove that he's a sneaky good catcher with some pop back there. And if the Rockies get good production, get 100 games from Chris Bryant and get 400, 500 at-bats from him, that's going to change things. He does have depth. And Charlie Blackmon, while he's not what he once was, has still been a very serviceable leadoff man who's going to get to be able to take his, career kind of, he gets to take his lap. This is going to be probably his final lap. We thought it might've been last year, but there's just so much, there's more energy, there's more vibes. And then like we mentioned at the top, it's spring training. I know, grain of salt, but there are noticeable improvements that you can see from some of these Rockies players. Like I mentioned, Kyle Freeland increasing his fastball velocity by 4 miles per hour is a game changer. That will change things drastically for a guy that at the end of season last year was topping out at 88, 87, So, I mean, there's a lot that can change here. Now, I just like I have said with all of when I hype up the Rockies, are they a wild card team? Are they a dart? No. But can they win 70 games? Yes, they can win 70 games this year. They can, we like to poke fun. The Padres always struggle against the Rockies. They, a classic team where the Padres need to come in and beat the Rockies. But if they can keep being a thorn in the side of the NL West teams, that's going to be great. But they also need to start beating the NL West because the NL West bullied the Rockies last year. The Padres were the team that fared the worst, but they still had a good record against them. So there's a lot the Rockies need to do to surprise people. But, man, I just think that there's more on these two teams than people are giving credit for, obviously, because we're overshadowed by the fact that the Dodgers had one of the biggest off seasons of all time. But, again, and you'll hear us dive into this a little bit more on our NL West preview when that drops. Yeah. The Dodgers got to prove it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we can talk about all these things with the Padres and the Rockies and all this stuff, but until the Dodgers actually prove to be this dominant, real playoff force, I'm still going to shrug my shoulders a little bit and kind of be like, hey, pull the Stugotz out a little bit and say that, hey, you got to prove it in the big game, do it in the playoffs, because I'm not really going to be impressed by a 100+ win season by the Dodgers. I know how crazy that is to say, but I don't know. Let's wind down the show and just kind of focus again on some off seasons here. And we talked a little bit about it, but which team do we think set themselves up for more success? Because the Rockies off season was panned critically by a lot of people, just like their projections. But I want to ask you about contracts and the money that was spent this free agency period and how it relates to these two teams and what we've learned a little bit. We're going to do that coming up here in segment number 3. But before we do that, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes PrizePicks. PrizePicks is North America's largest daily fantasy sports platform. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, you pick more than or less than, that's it, more than, less than, super easy, on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And the app has a fun new feature called Demons and Goblins. Demon picks are marked in red, and they are the scary picks that accelerate your heartbeat because you can win big money, as in 100 times your money. So if you bet $10, you can win 1,000, but you might be more cautious. You can always choose a goblin pick marked green because it is designed to keep you in the green and allow you to land consistent victories. If you're into the NBA, you can pick more than or less than on everything from 3-pointers made to turnovers committed. And for spring training baseball, you can pick more than or less than on pitcher strikeouts and first inning runs. So download the app today and enter code LOCKEDONMLB. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB, all one word and in lowercase letters, and get that first deposit match up to $100. Join PrizePicks today. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Locked On Podcast Network crossover here as we got spring training action between the Padres and the Rockies. Well, not actually playing each other. I don't think the Rockies and Padres have played each other yet this spring training. I'm not sure.
They haven't, thank God, frankly, because, I mean, you've mentioned the thorn in the side. You brought up CJ Kern before. The guy is Bonds whenever he plays the Padres. It's actually almost funny. It really is. Like, the big season last year with the Bogart signing and all that stuff, especially with all the hype, and then them starting off their season just getting their absolute like shell shocked by the Rockies. Looking back is actually kind of funny. It just is. It's almost like the same way. And I've been super open about this. I was rooting for the Padres to break the record for most extra innings losses because I genuinely thought it would have been really funny. Just for you to manage to just be as bad as conceivably possible with the roster. Just incredible stuff. But look, man, that's a step on you introing it, but surprise. Which team is more likely to surprise? Is that what we want to tell folks? Because look, man,
you take the floor here because I think
sure.
I think that there is a case to be made that the Padres take it away from the Diamondbacks and can be in there. I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy.
Look, Diamondbacks negative run differential last year. It is true though. They did make improvements. I like that they didn't just sit there and say, oh, we got a prospect. And, we'll sign, no offense to him, first name that came to mind, a Rich Hill type, where it's like, oh, he's a proven vet. He'll fill innings for us. Instead, they're like, we're getting Erod. We're trading for Eugenio Suarez. We upgraded the bullpen a tiny bit. Like, I like that they did that stuff. They have a nice bench. There's a real chance that all the teams in the NL West are like a genuine, outside the Rockies, are like genuinely competing for a wild card spot. I could totally see that. And I could honestly see the Rockies get a little bit frisky at times. Do you remember like the Royals 2 years ago when they weren't good? Like they still were like 4th or 5th that year, but they got frisky. They were a team where like you see some of the talent, you see Bobby Witt, you see guys like Vinny Pasquantino start breaking out for them and whatnot. I think that's kind of, look at the Royals from, I think it was 2 years ago. That's a team, and I'm not even trying to be patronizing. Like, I think that's a team to like aspire to, where you're frisky. You look like a team for once. Yeah, and there's guys to go and watch. And look, I think both of our teams can surprise, like you said. I think the Giants can surprise people. They're certainly trying to. They're signing as many people as they can. But on the Rockies end of it, you talk about McMahon. Look, I've seen crazier things. If you look at a Savant, it's actually pretty good. He hits the ball decently hard. He's an electric defender, arguably one of the most underrated in the game. Now, granted, him not being able to hit is why I think people ignore the defense sometimes. But Ezequiel Tovar, he's young. You've got Nolan Jones, who's a freak, who might be just a genuine star. Who knows, maybe even a sleeper MVP candidate. Brendan Rodgers is still, once upon a time, a highly regarded prospect, and it looked like he was making some strides, but got hurt last year.
Yeah.
I think Chris Bryant can have a good year. I think that the hopes that he could be a dude who's like a piece for the future, I don't see that. I'm worried about the decline in the slugging. I'm worried about the fact that he got hurt already, and that when he was healthy for a little bit last year, he was just not effective. 73 WRC plus is really bad. Negative WAR player. Can he still have that good season though? I absolutely think he could, and could help this team. And hey, maybe at least give you one good season. I don't think that's too crazy to ask. He's not too old. And
good
then
in context too.
Mhm.
Contribute. Just
Yes,
contribute to the be a 2R player. And I know that's
exactly.
crazy to say,
I
but
know, right? Yeah.
that's a huge step up in the right
Mhm.
direction, at least from what we're used to. And that means in certain situations he'll come up big. But yeah, again, I think the rest of the NL West will surprise the rest of baseball because of the Dodgers just overshadowing everybody. I think the Giants always hang around. I always joke it's an even year too. I think you can't
Mhm.
count them out in an even year. But yeah, I one thing just to close out. I don't think the Rockies made a mistake this offseason by not diving in and getting in on some of these contracts. While would I have wanted the Rockies to get Shohei and Glass now and have the Dodgers offseason? Yeah, of course, absolutely. But it also wouldn't have made all the most sense for the Rockies. This is a year to figure your stuff out right now and make the splashes in the offseason going
Mhm.
forward or at the trade deadline looking
Let's see what we
forward.
have, yeah.
Yeah,
Gotta
because
see what you have.
if
Mhm.
you keep bringing in big name contracts, then you're never going to see what you have with some of these guys. You're never going to know. So let's figure out what guys we can get on, rookie deals, lower end deals to build up, and then
Mhm.
let's go get an all-star catcher next year. If Elias, if we move on, or go to
Mhm.
Drew Romo. There's just so much that you can do.
Yeah.
Because eventually the Rockies are going to be able to go to a pitcher. Like take Blake Snell right now, for example. I mean, and it's
Mhm.
not that, but say there's a Cy Young winner that's sitting at spring training next year without a team, and the Rockies finish with 72 wins, and they go up to you and they say 2-year deal, 2-year deal, and you prove
Mhm.
everyone that you can go to Coors Field and you can what happens if he dominates and he has
Yeah.
an opt out? And you're gonna have to get creative with bringing in pitchers to back up some of these players
Mhm.
because they're gonna have good defense and hopefully the offense is gonna be improved. And so it opens up a pathway that I think that the Rockies can be an interesting team to want to go and sign and play for next if things continue to progress slowly.
Mhm.
But some teams are going to want to see that switch flipped, and fans are going to want to see it flipped quickly.
Mhm.
But I just don't think you can count on the Rockies being a Diamondbacks and a Rangers team to just say, all right, worst season in franchise history, middling year,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we can, then we'll spend some money and do that. They're going to have to get creative, but I want to at least keep an open mind that they can. But I'm not going to sit here and say that the Rockies really failed this offseason because they missed out. I will say this: Joey Gallo would have been a cool ad. If
Yeah.
there would have
Yeah.
there are some interesting veteran bench ads that you could have had,
Yes. Yes.
but
It's not that they failed because you didn't improve the team to have a chance. You don't even know what you have yet.
right,
D-backs didn't do anything last year because they were
yeah,
like, we like our farm, but like, let's just see what we have.
mm-hmm,
And they turned out right. And then they waived this offseason. And also, I would tell people, man, look, if there is an offseason to spend, it wasn't this one.
right,
Yes, I know about the demigod. I know, but aside from him, it's kind of a weak free agent class, and next year's stacked. I think that there are 3 pitchers alone that are better than Blake Snell. That enter free agency next year. 3. It's like
mm-hmm,
Walker Buehler. Frankly, I wouldn't sleep on Frankie Montas. That's my toxic take. I actually think he could make a bounce back this year. But him, there's Walker Buehler, there's Corbin Burns, there's Max Fried. I think all 3 of those guys are potentially better than Blake Snell. And that's just 3 pitchers. And then
right.
discounting the depth guys and players at first base like Pete Alonso and Paul Goldschmidt. I think that this was an offseason to wait. If you missed out on Ohtani or if you missed out on, I think Teoscar Hernandez is a fun one because that's a player who's pretty good and also you could get him for 1 year. Aside from that, though, like I do agree though, like the Rockies should have tried to get just a couple of veterans, like your Joey Gallo, and at the very minimum, he'll just hit a couple moonshots, and that'll be pretty fun to replay on highlight video, especially in Coors. So I would have done that, but look, I think that overall the Rockies are hopefully a step in the right direction. I think it would have been a mistake. I joked to you that what would be a Rockies thing to sign Cody Bellinger to like a massive $150 million deal, similar to what they did with Chris Bryant when they weren't really in the position to do that yet. And they didn't. And I actually think it's okay because they don't know what they have. This is not like the A's who for like 25 years refused to spend, including when they were good.
Right.
I think when your team, you don't know what you're getting, you're having one of the worst seasons ever. I think it's okay if you're like, let's like hope that we even have stuff because then we want to have higher draft picks. We don't want to be committed to any players. We don't want to block any minor leaguers we might have that might end up being better or get better reps and stuff. So I think the Rockies, it wasn't the worst offseason. To me, the Arenado offseason is 10 times worse because that's the player that can help you kickstart it. You know what I mean? And instead, they did not do that, and they paid the salary. That alone makes it worse. Them doing nothing. It's like, do you remember Nathan Peterman in the NFL?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Do you remember that stat that him throwing an incompletion increases QBR? Like, that's kind of the Rockies, where it's like them not doing anything already makes this a better offseason than the year that they traded Arenado for nothing. It's that was a huge miss, and hopefully, new leadership, and whatnot can step in and help out. So I'm with you, man. I think both of our teams really can surprise people, and more so the Rockies. I think they could be that frisky Royals team from a couple years ago, where it's like, yeah, they're not good, but some stuff
they're fun.
You can watch them. They're fun. Yeah, they're fun.
Because last year there were just points where, man, they were just not fun to watch. But it's always fun talking to you, Javi. Always a good time. Certainly won't be the last time we cross over here on the lovely Locked On Podcast Network. You can find us here on our YouTube channels. I'm on the Locked On Rockies podcast. You can find me at Paul Holden 33 as well on X. Javi, where do they need to go to make sure they're catching up with all things Locked On Padres and Javi Reyes?
Well, you can follow me at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO on Twitter. Or if you don't want my random tweets about movies and whatever the heck I'm tweeting about Dune lately, because that movie ripped, you can check out, of course, at LO_Padres, where the party of Padres talk never ends.
Yeah, you like graphics. You are advanced, folks.
I'm a next gen.
You don't get better coverage than that here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Podcast Network.